Welcome inside Black and Gold, Thursday Night Football edition. Saints taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And man, oh man, it has come fast and furious this week. I don't know how the players deal with it because I'm feeling dizzy myself. I'm sure you are, Jeff, of just everything being condensed. But like I mentioned before, hopping on with you, definitely looking forward to at least Sunday, some extended chill time on the couch.
Yes, and I'm glad you went with Fast and the Furious because much like the Fast and the Furious these days, none of this makes any sense. It's all a mess. Everything's here and there. The threads have been pulled out of the sweater. I don't know. All I know is the Saints got to find a way to win on Thursday night. And we're going to get into a lot about the offense this week. And Nick, it's got to look better because if it doesn't, I think heads have to roll to some extent. And we'll get into that. We'll also be talking to Hays Carlyon, Jaguars reporter for 1010XL in Jacksonville. He's not exactly bullish on the Jaguars' chances, so we're going to dive into that, whether he thinks Trevor Lawrence is going to actually play, all that stuff. So stay tuned for that in the second segment. And then the final segment, the Saints' biggest question this week, in my opinion, is who plays on the offensive line. Not whether they play well, who's actually out there. And I have some ideas about who might play. So we're going to dive into that in the third segment and then break down some of our X factors in this week's game. But, first things first, one of the things that I talked about in the last episode that I do want to kind of put a bow on is Cesar Ruiz. I was curious after watching that game whether he's ever played right tackle before in his life, let alone practiced it. Has he ever done it? And we got a chance to catch up with him in the locker room this week, and this is what he had to say.
Had you ever even practiced it at all?
I used to mess around. Like sometimes I would do it on last year. I'd mess around, do it on scout team just to mess around because I was like, my mom was like, I'm never going to do this, so right. I had to mess around. So when I went out there, I was like, it's the first time I'm doing this in the game, but it's not the first time I've ever done this, But first time I had to do it when it mattered.
Right.
So
how hard is that to do, man? I mean, that's
it's definitely interesting. It's definitely something new to do. Especially move from center, guard, tackle. I've done it. I've done all three now, so I can say that.
Tight end next, right? We're gonna slide you on. Keep on sliding.
Yeah, that's right. Put me at running back. Do something like that too. But yeah, I mean, it was. Didn't really think much about it though. It was kind of just like, hey, Cesar, we need you. Cool. I'm gonna go do it.
Yeah, I mean, that was my question. How did that conversation go? Did you volunteer? Was it?
It wasn't much of a conversation. Yeah. It was like it wasn't time to have a conversation. Like, hey, we need you to go do it. All right, cool. I'll go do it.
And there you go. I like Cesar. I think he's had a kind of off and on start to this year. I would have liked to see him come out a little hotter. I think he had a really solid step forward season last year. He ended it with the injury. He was healthy throughout camp. I think he is still kind of finding his way back. But, there are worse things to be than the offensive lineman who can play every position. You talk about guys who can be flexible on the offensive line. Usually it's like, oh, he can play guard or tackle. Oh, he can play guard or center. Oh, he can play center. Maybe he should just play all positions, just play all five in one game. I doubt there's anyone that's ever done that. Maybe that's what it is. But anyway, I don't think he played particularly well at right tackle, but like he said, basically all he had done to prepare for that was watch Ryan in practice for a couple of years and be like, how hard could it be? Well, it's kind of hard.
No, and I like when you asked him, what was that discussion like? He's like, there wasn't really much of a discussion.
Yeah. And I asked Dennis Allen, was that even kind of the plan going into the game? Like if Ryan went down, maybe Cesar could be the guy. And he was like, no. That was the plan after everyone got hurt. And we're going to talk a lot about the offensive line in the final segment, but as we look at the offense and we talk about the offense, I just think it's important to kind of set that as the idea of you can only do so much behind an offensive line that is just leaking like a sieve. And so how much can you expect out of that line? You got to be able to run the ball. As you kind of prepare this game plan for this week, people are going to be like, oh, you need to make changes. You need to do this. You need to do that. I need them to be able to do the things that they think is good, that they can do. right? It's all the things you want to do. What can you do is the real question you need to answer.
Yeah, and unfortunately, running the football hasn't been one of those things that has come easily for this squad. A positive, though, hey, you're getting another one of your main backs back in the rotation, but how big of a role is Jamal Williams going to see?
Yeah, he was limited in practice the last 2 days, whatever that means. Like, they haven't really practiced. They just do these kind of walkthroughs. So, but like, if they don't need to see him practice to play, I would be surprised if he has a huge role. I think this is kind of going to be one of those, like, okay, get him in there for a couple reps and see how he looks. And if he looks good, maybe give him some more work. But yeah, either way, I would love to see him be a short yardage guy, like be a weapon in short yardage. Because, as much as I love Alvin, I don't want to see him have to go out there and pound his head into the line. I want to see them be more creative with him and get him working the passing game, get him involved in the screen game. And, there's only so many reps you can throw at that guy in terms of you want to keep him healthy. And so, that's a big thing about getting Jamal back.
I feel like the same thing with Taysom too. There's so many, you don't want to run him into the ground either with all the beating he takes with contact.
Yeah, and I mean, so the thing is with Taysom in short yardage, while it's a good option to have, the problem is it's very, very telegraphed. So
right.
At least with Jamal in there is the idea that he could, you could play action out of it and go deep or something, right? With Taysom, while it does work a good chunk of the time, the defense knows exactly what they're getting and they're going to load up. And so it's tough to run. Even when you have that extra blocker, it's tough to run like that. There's only so much inches of grass you can put your feet on, right? Like, where do you find that space? So yeah, I think that's just an advantage to have a guy like that. But, one thing that, we heard from Pete Carmichael this week, and he got his Akon on. And I say that because, every time I hear Pete Carmichael talk, it reminds me of that Akon song where he's like, blame it on me. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you could put the blame on me. And he says it 8 times in a row. Like, literally.
Oh, no, I was thinking I'm blame it on the alcohol. Never mind.
No, different song. Yeah. If you look up the lyrics to Blame It On Me by Akon, there is one set of lyrics that is literally like, you blame it on me, blame it on me, blame it on me, blame it on me, blame it on me. You can put the blame on me. It's like literally that for like a minute.
That's on me.
And it's a good song. It's a good song. The context of it is a little weird to compare it to because, you can Google that all you want. But anyway, that's what we get from Pete Carmichael. He's going to take the blame, but there's no real solutions being offered. One thing he did say this week that I know is going to get a huge eye roll from fans is the idea that maybe the offense is too complicated right now. And I actually think it's accurate. I think that is something that the Saints need to look at. But this is how that all went down.
Consider reducing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's one of the things that you look at and say, hey, are we trying to do too much? Do we have too much in? And so I think that's always a consideration.
Are you at that point right now?
I think we again, a short week too as well, going in there and just making sure that we're doing our core things.
When some of those communication issues, are they almost always on adjustments or checks or
no? It could just be. It could be up.
And what is? I mean, I feel like this is something you hear around the league every year from offenses and defenses. We're going to simplify things. What is that usually a last resort? Is that a negative when you hear a team?
I don't think it is. I think it's just sometimes you as a coaching staff you got to be careful that you're not doing too much, and I think that's what that can happen anytime, any year, even when things are going well. So I think that it's just a matter of reduce and make sure we're doing our core things, the things we believe in, that guys are comfortable with.
Beyond just the communication, were there some issues in terms of route depth, and it seemed like some of the mesh concepts were very compressed?
Yeah, I just again, I think again we all have to be better. So
we all have to be better, And again, I could already see. I don't even need to look. I'm sure if anyone tweeted that, I think Aaron Summers might have tweeted that, and I saw it had 30 quote tweets, and I don't even need to read them to know exactly what's being said about that comment. But I do think that there is this misconception with NFL offense that more complicated equals better. And it's not true. A lot of times you can outthink yourself And it's like, you have all these playmakers. You don't need to do crazy stuff to get them open, but you do need to get everything right. You do need to get the details right. And I think that there are points in this season where you're trying to do things. It's like, no, you just run a slant. Just let Mike run slants. Like, why are you trying to run like these weird concepts with motion when it's like you can't do the simple things right? And while I do think you want to incorporate motion, you don't want to give the same look every time. You do need to execute. And I think that there are points where it's like, yeah, pare it down. Make sure everyone is on the same page and run the offense. Run the ball. Just get to your core run plays and execute them correctly, right? And I think you throw the ball 50 times in a game, in a game that you didn't need to throw 50. Like in a shootout game, sure. If it's like a 40-35 game, throw the ball all you want. You got to keep pace. In a game like that, both teams scored 3 points in the second half. What did that passing actually get you? And so I actually agree. I think that the Saints offense would work better if it was streamlined and you just kind of ran an offense. I listened to, there was a podcast, it was actually in our podcast feed, that's why I found it, with Mark Schlereth talking about the Saints offense. And, he called the game in Houston. So he has a good idea of what he's talking about. And one of the things that he said that I agree with is when the Saints are out there calling plays, it doesn't seem like they're calling an offense. It seems like they're calling this play. It's like, okay, what's the next play? They're calling plays. They are not calling an offense. They are not setting things up and hitting them the way that you really need to for rhythm offense to work. And so for me, that's what I want to see. I don't need to see crazy motions. It'd be great if they could do that and execute. It'd be great if they were the 49ers or the Dolphins and you could have all of these exotic, motions and shifts and stuff like that. But that's not what you need to be successful. You need to run, like he said, you need to execute your core plays, your core beliefs, the things that you have to work for you to be successful. You have to execute those correctly. And you need to be able to run a mesh concept and get to the right depth on your routes. And they just haven't been doing that. And so, I agree with that. I think that if the Saints team executed the plays that, are their bread and butter, we wouldn't be having these conversations about, why is nothing working? We'd be talking about, okay, what can they add to it to make it more effective? But we don't have that baseline right now. That baseline isn't there. And you're seeing these crazy penalties. You're seeing these I don't know. It's just, especially in the red zone where, you can get all wonky and creative and you can do all these things, but it's like the guys have to be where they're supposed to be. And the quarterback needs to get the ball there on time and on target. And that's what hasn't happened. It hasn't been about, wow, you need to create these new crazy concepts to confuse the defense. The offense has the playmakers to beat the defense. They don't have to confuse the defense to beat them. They have to beat them. And so that's, to me, I agree. I think that is something that, especially this week and a short week where you're coming off of this slop fest of a game, just get it right, guys. Just do the work, do the preparation, and get the plays right.
I mean, we're hearing from everybody. You mentioned Pete Carmichael saying, blame it on me, but we're hearing that from the players too. Oh, the players are saying, "No, I don't want to hear putting stuff on the coaches. It's on us," kind of thing. So it's like it's like the anti-Spider-Man meme. Nobody's pointing fingers at anybody. It's like except yourself. And I know Alvin said that too. It's like everybody's got to, get a little more look in the mirror kind of thing and be more, what was the term he said? Having to sacrifice, right? It doesn't feel like certain guys, and not naming names at all, but to me, I'm curious who is not on the same page with everyone else right now. That seems to be an issue every week, though. It's not like, I mean, you throw the Patriots game out the way, and this offense hasn't looked good at all season long.
No, and I know there's a lot of criticism being thrown at Chris Olave, and I think a good chunk of it is merited. When you whether it's preparation or effort, those are two different things. I do think there's some concerning things you see with Chris Olave from week to week in terms of, it seems like if he's not getting the ball, he becomes disengaged. And that's not a unique thing to Chris Olave. You've seen that. I remember Jeremy Shockey early in his career, great player, great pass catching tight end, but it was always like, you got to involve him early, because if you don't, he's just going to kind of loaf around out there because doesn't feel like he's part of the game plan. And, I don't know if that's what's happening with Chris, but it does feel like if you don't get him the ball, then you don't necessarily get top end Chris Olave. And, he's a young player. That's something that I think Dennis Allen said you got to be a pro every day. And that's tough for young players to kind of turn to, especially for a guy coming out of Ohio State. He's used to winning every week. He's not used to this level of adversity in terms of the offense not working.
Look at Mike T. That's a great role model to have, obviously. That guy's giving everything all the time.
Yeah, right. And I think that's where, when Alvin is expressing frustration like that, it's because he and Mike and, just a lot of other players, DeMario, Cam, they came up into this system when everyone did that. And everyone was dedicated to the level that was insane and extreme. And Drew was kind of the standard bearer in that regard. And, I think Derek is a crazy worker in that vein too. But like I said, he's new to this room. Like he's not going to be the guy that everyone looks to as the example setter. It's got to be Alvin. It's got to be Mike. And they've got to find ways to get that level of investment out of these young guys. And based on what Alvin said, I don't know if that's necessarily happening. And when you say they're not pointing fingers, like Alvin's not technically pointing fingers, but he named a lot of names of guys that he's not talking about. So if he weren't in that list,
right,
then he is calling you out
in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, not directly, right? He listed numbers, man, and he was like, "I don't worry about this guy. I don't worry about this guy. I don't worry about this guy." Well, there's a lot of names on the offense that he did not mention, and so I think and like I've said before, people are going to say, "Well, you're just being easy on Derek Carr. You're just being easy on Pete Carmichael and the play calling." And it's like, I don't think I am. I think that criticism is actually more damning. That if you cannot get the effort out of your star players, especially the young players, then that's a problem. Then that's a coaching problem, because the players are going to be the players either way, right? Like you're not firing the player, So I think that's something. We talked to Mickey Loomis this week on WWL, and I don't necessarily. I'm not playing this for you as a cosign of what he's saying. Let's be clear. I'm just playing this for you so you get an idea of how the Saints front office is approaching this and how they are projecting what they see from this offense. And so here's that.
But I am curious to the frustration level. It just feels like, and it's been talked about, just kind of some of the miscommunication, the routes, and these guys have been together not long, but they have been since the spring. Is just how tough is that really through 6 weeks?
Well, it's always frustrating when you don't win. It's not as frustrating if you win the game anyway.
Right.
But I feel like, listen, I think offenses typically in the early part of the season are slow starting, right? Look at week 6. We're in week 6 already, and so you would think that would be catching up. But just this week, we had, Kansas City scored 19 points. Minnesota scored 19 points. Cincinnati scored 17 points. San Francisco scored 17 points. Philadelphia scored 14 points. Buffalo scored 14 points. These are all really good offenses, and yet it's week 6, and it's not like they're, ringing up a lot of points in week 6. So we're going through some of that slow start. It hadn't caught up to us yet. We haven't caught up to it, I should say. And so we're going through some growing pains. We've got to figure that out pretty quickly. I saw some really good things in this game. We had 430 yards of offense. We've got to learn how to finish and how to not have negative plays when we get into the scoring area. Obviously, we have to kick and make field goals. So, look, those are things that are correctable, and I believe we have the people that can correct that.
And so, yes, and he's not wrong when Mickey says, like, I agree that there's a lot of teams around the NFL, and I think that's some valuable perspective that's at least worth having, is like the Saints are far from the only team in the NFL having really awkward conversations about play calling and offensive efficiency and red zone offense. Like the Eagles went out there and stunk it up against the Jets. I think Jalen Hurts had 3 interceptions. The Bills went out there and stunk it up against the Giants at home. Josh Allen really couldn't get anything going until the fourth quarter. They went ahead and won that game. They probably should have lost that game. The Giants really let them off the hook, I think. And Kansas City didn't blow anyone out of the water. So there is truth to the idea that the Saints are far from alone in not offensively producing at a high level. The difference is the Saints have been doing this for 2 years. And you can say growing pains, but this is not a new offense. It's a new quarterback. But otherwise, it's actually a very consistent offensive group, right? Like, you didn't bring in Derek Carr and say, we're redesigning everything. You brought in Derek Carr because he's supposed to be able to execute that offense at a high level, and he has not been to this point. Like, I get it. He threw for 353 yards, which is actually tied with Jared Goff for the top passing performance in the NFL this week. But I think anyone who watched that game can show you the problems. This is a guy who has been an inconsistent and ineffective quarterback in the red zone his entire career, and through 6 weeks, he has been nothing but an inconsistent and inefficient quarterback in the red zone. And if you can't fix that, if you can't find a way to improve that, then this season is going to go down the tubes, and it's going to be another, well, can the defense get it done? Can a very good defense carry a team that otherwise can't score? And that's not what it was supposed to be. And so at a certain point, you do have to hold people accountable. And kind of what I was alluding to, and I've said this in the last episode, you're going into this Thursday night game. You need to see positive signs from the offense. You need to see them taking a step in the right direction, right? Then that's why, like, if you want to simplify things and you want to just get back to your core beliefs and do it correctly and do it right, and then it works, or at least looks like it has some potential to work, then I think you go into this 10-day layoff and you have then you can say, yes, we had growing pains. We are getting better. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. If you go into Thursday night and you lay a dud and you cannot do anything but move the ball between the 20s and hope you can kick enough field goals to win a game and hope that your defense can get in the end zone or set you up in short fields in which you're still kicking field goals on. That's what happened against the Patriots. And I think that you don't have a choice. You can't sit there and tell me after week 7 that you are looking at growing pains and you don't think there's any changes that need to be made, any significant changes, because at that point, you are doing a disservice to your fans. So I think this is a huge, huge week, a huge game for this team to at least install some realistic confidence against the Jags team that is exhausted. That should not be a team that you look at and say, we cannot go out and execute against this defense that just spent half of, October in London and then played a game, and now they're playing on a short week. Like, you should have the advantage, the New Orleans Saints playing at home. And if you cannot take advantage of that, then yes, I think you do need to, if not move on from Pete Carmichael, then you need to make changes and you need to find a way to install some leadership in this offense that can work, or at least can change the vibes around this team. And if you don't, then like I said, I'm not going to be at a 12 out of 10 all the time, but I'm getting close to, to the point where it's like, yeah, you do need to move on. You do need to make changes, because if you're not improving, then the growing pains are not growing pains. They're just pains.
Yeah, the offensive woes or heartaches, whatever we've been witnessing, have been going on for way too long now with this squad. Like you mentioned, it's not a new system. We just have a new quarterback in place. But for me, though, too, a lot of inconsistencies from a top-tier defense, and they need to come out in this game, too, for sure, and kind of set that tone right away that this is our house, and they're going to get after the quarterback, because if it is a guy like Trevor Lawrence, he's hurting, and you want to, get in his face early on, rattle him. And if it is Beathard, you certainly want to feast on a guy like that back there.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think there's a scenario where you win this game and you still feel like changes on the offense are merited. Right. Like, the defense very well could go out and win you this game, but that's winning this game 7-3 or whatever, 9-6. Like, I think that was the score when they beat Jacksonville a few years ago with Teddy. It was 13-6. Like, if you win a game like that, then I still don't see this as a ringing endorsement of anyone on the offensive coaching staff. That said, the defense can't go out and have a first half like it did against the Texans. That was unacceptable. And, I think that anyone on that defense will tell you that. One guy who's going to be interesting to look at is Demario Davis, who ended up on the injury report with a knee injury and would have been a DMP each of those first 2 days of practice. Now, they didn't really practice, so I don't know. He was out there. We did see him. So it's not like he was completely absent. Like it's not like he's in a walking boot or anything like that. Like I expect him to play. And one of the reasons, and we talked about this before we came on, Demario Davis, and this is remarkable, has never missed a game due to injury in his NFL career. The only game he missed in his NFL career was in 2021 rather, the COVID game against the Dolphins where half the defense wasn't there. Half the team wasn't there, really. That's the only game in his NFL career he has missed. So I would be stunned if he's not out there. But if he's not, man, hopefully, I think it's probably a Jalen Smith game.
We need to get like the DNA of Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and somehow create some superhuman that is, impervious to anything.
Well, here's the thing. They're not impervious to anything. They
play through it. Right. Yes. They play through it.
The toughness is the biggest factor. Because you're kidding yourself if you think that he's not going out there in like dealing with stuff a lot. All these players are. Some players manage it better than others. Cam Jordan's dealing with a back injury right now.
Right. I love he said too. His basically, I heard him from the locker room yesterday, and he's like, "Yeah, at this point, week 7, everybody's got their thing. I can't think about it. I'll rest on Friday."
Yeah. Yeah. and that's the thing. There is a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of you will get some extra days off. And those days will feel great if you're 4-3. They will feel miserable if you are 3-4. And so, like, again, it's a huge matchup. They better win. You had if you had gone out and beaten Houston, then you could look at this and say, like, kind of the way the Jags are, like, I don't think that they're in a desperate situation. The Saints are. The Saints need to go out and play like a desperate team, and if they can't, then that is a huge negative mark in the column of this coaching staff. And so we'll have to see. But that's all I got. You got anything else you want to say on that matchup before we move on to talk to Hays here?
Definitely looking forward to getting into the Dome Thursday for a night game. We've been around these noon starts way too much. And yeah, getting that primetime action, and I know as well, the crowd is going to be a lot different come Thursday night, obviously, than what we've seen this year.
I hope so.
Right. The team's got to give them reason to be that rabid fan base we know we're used to.
Yeah, they'll be loud at the start of the game. My question is whether they're going to be loud in the third quarter because of the performance they're watching makes it so it's like, you want to beat the traffic?
Right.
Yeah, we'll see. But all right, let's wrap up that segment, that shiny, happy segment, and move on. We're going to chat with Hays Carlyon of 1010XL in Jacksonville. Covers the Jaguars. Going to break down what we might see from Jacksonville, whether Trevor Lawrence might play, whether it's going to be CJ Beathard, what he's seeing there, how the Doug Peterson offense is moving, is trucking. And we're going to break down a lot of that. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about our expectations for the offensive line, X factors, all that fun stuff. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. My name is Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold, getting ready for the Saints-Jaguars Thursday Night Football matchup. I feel like it's still week 5, but here we are in week 6, and it's happening. I'm Jeff Nowak, alongside Steve Geller, as always. And as promised, we are bringing in Jaguars reporter for 1010XL in Jacksonville. Hays Carlyon is going to break down what the Saints can expect from Jacksonville, or should I say Saxonville, on Thursday. Hays, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Jeff, it's actually week 7.
Oh my God, you're right. I'm all over the place. You
think you were in London for 2 weeks?
Yeah, I'm not going to redo that introduction because that's just my state of mind right now, and so that's just that's where we are. But anyways, Hays, I feel like I'm all over the map, but the Jaguars have literally been all over the map. They spent 2 weeks in London. They come back. They don't get a week off. A lot of times you'll see teams take that bye. I know they have the option to get that bye after the London trip. They clearly decided they didn't want that early bye. So, what is the state of Jacksonville right now, or the Jaguars, I should say, as they head into this matchup? Because for a Thursday night matchup, I feel like the Jaguars are actually getting the short end of this from a travel and kind of recovery perspective.
It's a massive challenge. I mean, I think the Jaguars did a magnificent job of handling their business in London. They had an embarrassing effort at home against Houston, losing by 20, losing record going overseas, but they're able to Atlanta, upset Buffalo. So a tremendous trip there. And then they had the challenge of, okay, you're coming back and you've got a massive divisional game against Indianapolis at home. Both teams were, co-leading the AFC South. The Jaguars get it done there. So now, I think this game doesn't set up well for the Jaguars at all. They're playing well. And they do have some injuries that we'll talk about. But I think just at some point in the NFL, you kind of take a deep breath. And I think when that happens, your focus drops. And my guess is that's going to be this game for the Jaguars. So I think I'm expecting a pretty sloppy game Thursday, and one in which I think the first one to 20 probably wins the game.
Yeah, we'll be lucky if we get to 20 from what we've been seeing from the Saints offense of late. It hasn't been a smooth operation at all, but a big issue over here has been the offensive line. I know that's pretty similar out in Jacksonville as well. They've been shuffling around some guys.
It's been a real problem since training camp opened, really, and it hasn't gotten any better. I mean, they now have issues at left guard because Walker Little could play, but I don't expect him to. Brandon Sheriff, the right guard, is nursing an injury. I think he'll play, but he won't be 100%. And so, they've got some issues there at guard. And, you got a rookie right tackle, Anton Harrison, who's been playing better. But that's certainly a difficult environment in the Superdome with New Orleans as front. So how will he handle that? Cam Robinson had a 4-game suspension, the left tackle. So, he's still rounding back into form. So not a whole lot to feel great about. And the center, Luke Fortner, is a very cerebral player, but struggles with the physicality of the game sometimes. He's in his second year. So it's really been an issue for the Jaguars, just really getting some cohesiveness because the lineup has just been in such flux, really from the opening day of camp.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the biggest question from an injury perspective is, at least from Saints fans, because they have their own issues with the offensive line. They're not even thinking about the Jags offensive line, even though it's going to be a big element of this game. The question is Trevor Lawrence going to play? The Saints kind of had that same situation in week 4, and everyone kind of assumed, okay, Derek Carr's dealing with a shoulder sprain. There's no way he plays. Well, he finds a way to get out there. And I think from a toughness perspective, Trevor Lawrence is similar in that, he's going to do everything in his power to play. And, at a certain point, maybe it's a protect the player from himself kind of scenario. But what is your read on that? I know they've said it's kind of a minor knee sprain, but I don't know how minor can a knee sprain be is my question on a short week. So what is your read on that?
That's the thing. He practiced a little bit yesterday. Obviously still has today, tomorrow. I don't think they'll really know anything until he gets to New Orleans, and you see how he responded from the flight and things like that. So I think it could be something where we don't know definitively until Thursday morning. It could go all the way up to 90 minutes before kick, but I think it's probably going to be something where we don't know anything definitively until Thursday. I think he's going to be active, but and I think he's going to start. But I think in looking at it, there's a lot that goes into this. Is he going to be able to finish the game? Does he get 15 plays in, get hit, and feel like it's just not right? I can't protect myself. I can't move the way I want. So it's the first time he's had to deal with anything like this in his career. So it is a big test for him. I think he'll do everything he can to be out there, and I do think he'll play and give it a go. But it's certainly something to monitor because the backup C.J. Beathard, while he's a experienced journeyman, has not fared well in the limited action that he's had in his career.
Yeah, no, C.J. Beathard, he likes to throw the deep ball. At least we know. I think that much about the guy. But yet, how different will that offense look if he has to end up running the show? I know ATN has been a real big focal point in the run game for the Jags, but man, I feel like there's really a nice set of weapons all around whoever's that quarterback, honestly.
There is. They've got Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. Zay Jones is a very good player as well. I don't know that he's going to be able to play with the knee injury. So, but even if Zay is inactive, the quarterback does have 3 really enviable options to throw to. And Etienne has been phenomenal running the ball this year. So there is a good amount of skill around, whoever the quarterback ends up being Thursday night. I think the concern would be the offensive line and just handling the crowd and just the being the 4th game where you've got 2 in London, you come home to, like you guys mentioned, play the Colts, short week, traveling to New Orleans, a team that is desperate to get a win and show that they're functional. And so I think in looking at it, it's a tough putt. I think from an intangible standpoint. For the Jaguars. Now they've tried to use that edge in terms of who's going to be starting at quarterback and make the Saints really probably work more on Beathard than they would have in a normal situation. But we'll see if that ends up really mattering at all in terms of how it plays. I think the Jaguars offensively are in for a pretty tough day in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's funny because like I said, we dealt with the same thing in week 4. And one thing I was sure about is regardless of when they decide who their starting quarterback is, there's going to be a smokescreen in play until the last possible second because, there's few advantages that come with your quarterback getting hurt. One of them is forcing the other team to have some mystery in that process. It didn't work for the Saints. They got beaten up in that game. But yeah, so I fully expect that to go down to game time, whether he plays or not. But, from kind of a broader perspective, a broader offensive perspective, this obviously is a run heavy team to begin with. You have Evan Ingram, who's, we call him a tight end. I don't know if he's closer to Kyle Pitts. Like that's kind of who I comp him to in terms of, he's not really playing tight end. I don't think you're sending him out there to be a a jumbo package blocker a lot of the time. But what does this offense do well on a good day? Like when the offense is humming, what is working for them?
Well, if Trevor is active and really isn't overly bothered by the knee, if he's 90% of what he normally is, then New Orleans has a heck of a problem because he can make every throw. He's kind of found some knack to his game that wasn't there his first couple of years in the league and has really hit his stride. And again, it's hard to focus on one element of the aerial attack because Ridley is a very good player. Christian Kirk's a very good player. And as you mentioned, Evan Ingram is quite a weapon as a receiver. So it's hard to really if you try to take something away, then they'll just go to one of the other options. And Trevor's done a good job of distributing the ball. It's pretty even when you look at the targets. So that's the concern. I think the concern for New Orleans would be if you can't pressure Trevor, and I think they'll be able to, but let's just say the Jaguars offensive line plays better than expected. Yeah, then it becomes difficult because they've got a good ground game with Etienne. And then obviously Trevor Lawrence is very capable through the air. So when the Jaguars are 100%, they're certainly a tough team to defend. Doug Peterson does a really nice job schematically. Again, I think it's so often in this league, it's just when are you catching the team? And I think the Saints are catching the Jaguars at a really good time to get the victory over them.
Overall, what would you say about Doug Peterson? Because he was a guy, obviously, that interviewed in New Orleans. And there are, I would say, quite a few bitter Saints fans right now feeling that they missed out on, bringing him in and then now dealing with Dennis Allen and are trying to get him, the offensive coordinator, and just about everybody else run out of town.
Doug's been phenomenal. Obviously, he took over after the Urban Meyer nightmare, and they had to kind of rebuild everything and rebuild the trust, with the players. And he did a magnificent job of that in year one. And it's continued. And I mean, they're a very tight team. Again, I think the Jaguars, I don't expect them to play particularly well Thursday, but I do think they're going to win the division again. I think that they're going to be a tough out in the tournament. And a lot of that's because of Doug Peterson, because of the offense he's brought in. He's been the perfect coach for Trevor Lawrence. in terms of being able to relate to him as somebody who's played the position in the NFL. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been a head coach previously. He's just seen it all, and he's had such success that I think it's really helped Trevor Lawrence out. And then they've taken advantage of Trevor Lawrence being on a rookie contract and not having that massive cap hit. So they've put a pretty good team around him. So, defensively, the Jaguars have gotten better as well, which has been a surprise. They've played really well in 5 of the 6 games so far this season. So that's been a pleasant surprise in Jacksonville. But yeah, I mean, I think Doug Peterson, I don't think there's a Jaguars fan out there that isn't thrilled with how he's done.
What's been sorry, I'm just curious too. What's been the fervor with all these takeaways for the team this year? It seems to be something that they're really built upon and carrying on to week. It hasn't just been a fluke.
It's really been a little bit of everything. Their pass rush is one of their bigger weaknesses, but Josh Allen's played really well, and the turnovers have really been a collective effort. Andre Sisco's, the safety's having a big-time year. He's a young player. Darius Williams has an interception in the last 3 games. So they're sort of coming from everybody, and I think that's what's been such a pleasant surprise for the Jaguars so far. I will say, and this is another reason why I think it's going to be difficult Thursday in the Superdome for the Jaguars, not having Tyson Campbell is a massive issue for the Jaguars. And I don't think he's going to play with the hamstring. So I think he's a top 6-7 corner in the league. And when they don't have him, there is a massive drop-off. They have other issues or other injuries at corner too that make it difficult. They're going to start Buster Brown, it looks like, in place of Tyson Campbell. I have to think that's New Orleans' game plan, is to attack that corner as often as they can with their talented receivers. So the Jaguar defense has played really well. I understand the Saints are struggling, but not having Tyson Campbell, I mean, he's arguably their most valuable defender. He's at worst their third. And I would say you can make a case for Josh Allen, but I think overall Tyson Campbell, not having him is a gigantic loss for the secondary. So they have been able to get takeaways. We'll see if that continues, but not having Tyson Campbell, I think, really is going to put the Jaguars in a tough spot.
Well, so the first thing I'll do is caution you against assuming the Saints offense is going to do what makes sense. The second thing I'll say is, you look at this Jaguars defense and there's a lot of high draft picks on it, particularly on the defensive line, right? You got Josh Allen, you got Trayvon Walker, even Caleb Chaison's a guy we know from LSU. He was a first-round draft pick. Roy Robertson Harris is a name I feel like I hear all the time on the inside. Foyesade Aloakun, I don't even know where he was drafted, but I didn't know how to say the name. So I felt like I would just throw that out there. What do you is this a pass rush that tries to get pressure with, without blitzing? What do they typically do? I haven't watched enough Jaguars game to have a read on how this team is going to approach this, but it does feel like if you are shorthanded in the secondary, maybe this is a game where you send a lot of pressure. So what, I guess, especially against the Saints offensive line, that's probably going to be starting 2 backup tackles. What do you expect to see in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question. Mike Caldwell's a second-year defensive coordinator, so obviously we're still trying to kind of figure out, build a book on him and tendencies and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're the Jaguars, because of the Saints issue on the offensive front, as you mentioned, I think they'll try to create pressure without really going after Carr and blitzing him. Obviously he's seen it all, so I'd be a little concerned about fooling him. So I think they'll certainly try to see if Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, if they can get some, pressure from the inside too, that'd be a bonus. But yeah, I would think it would be, particularly with Tyson out, I don't know that they'll trust their secondary to hold up if they blitz and they don't get there. So I would think more of a conservative game plan, but that's just a guess.
You're looking at obviously we hear all the time offense, defense, and special teams. What's your feel on the kicking situation for the Jags? Because to me, this very well could end up being a field goal type game in the Dome.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that is a great point. If it comes down to that, I think that if you told me now it's going to be decided by special teams, I would pick the Jaguars, because McManus has been fantastic at kicker. Logan Cook has been one of the better punters in the league for a while now for the Jaguars. So, and Jamal Agnew is one of the best returners. Yeah. So you have to really – Agnew is a major X factor for the Jaguars. In the opener, he had a 50-yard kick return that sort of sparked them. They were kind of sloppy. Agnew breaks the return. They score a touchdown off of it. They end up beating the Colts in week 1 in Indianapolis. He's that kind of guy. Like if the game is in a malaise, then I would be really hesitant to kick a ball to Jamal Agnew because it happened a few times last season. He doesn't tend to break them for touchdowns here. He did in Detroit, his first stop. But so he doesn't tend to break them for touchdowns here, but he'll break them for like 50, 60-yard gains. And the offense almost always scores off of him. So he is a microwave kind of player. Yeah. So if the Jaguars are kind of struggling to get something going offensively, I especially would not give Jamal Agnew a chance to break something because it just seems like it lifts the sideline so much more than even what the yardage gives them.
No, that's fair. Yeah. And the Saints, there's times where it feels like the only way they can move the ball is with a kick return. So we know that well. We're talking to Hays Carlyon with 1010 XL in Jacksonville, Jaguars reporter. And my last question is really only because you mentioned it, and it's very rare we have someone come on here and predict that their team loses. But what is your score prediction for this game?
I'll say it's something like I don't know, 2017, that kind of game, and even that might be a little high scoring. I just get a sense the Jaguars are this will be the game that they kind of play a sloppy game. They're not good enough that they're going to win 14 games this season. They're good enough to win 11. They're good enough to win the division, but it just feels like at some point the 2 games in London, the playing right after at home in a massive divisional game, it just seems like it's human nature that they're going to let their guard down a little bit. And I do think the Saints, it's one of those things that I think for New Orleans, it kind of helps that it's a short week because they need to get back out there and play. They're dealing with some turmoil. So I think that always helps when you can just say, let's just go play and have fun. And it's in the Superdome, which, I've covered games there. It's an amazing environment. I have to think, the Saints fans are going to be in a lather with it being a primetime game. So I just think it's going to be a difficult challenge for the Jaguars. I think if they were playing this game again later in the season, I'd probably pick the Jaguars to win it. I just think the game sets up really well for New Orleans. And, if the Jaguars, to me, are going to have to show incredible maturity and mental toughness to go out there and play well for a 4th straight week, considering everything that they've, gone through from a travel standpoint. So I think sloppy game, and I think the Saints pull it out at the end.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like, the Jaguars have put themselves in a position where they could afford to lose and say this is a schedule loss. The Saints are not in that position. So I do agree. I think that they should come out and play desperate because they're in a desperate type of situation right now. But all right, we've been talking to Hays Carlyon, Jaguars reporter for 1010 XL in Jacksonville. Check out his work if you want to go behind enemy lines and get ready for Thursday night football matchup, Saints-Jacksonville. Thanks so much, Hays. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Appreciate you, man.
But all right, thanks again to Hays Carlyon. You can check out his work at 1010 XL in Jacksonville. And so the good news from Hays, at least from what he told us, is the Jags are in just as dire straits as the Saints. And they aren't, and like I said, they are not in a position where they should feel desperate. Now, do they come out and play desperate? I don't know. Does it matter? I don't know. But we'll see. Either way, thanks, Hays, for the insight. We're going to wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to dive into, what's going on with the offensive line. I have my indication of what I think it's going to look like. It might not be what you think it's going to look like. So we're going to dive into that. Then we're going to break down some X factors as we do every week for, who we think could swing this matchup high or low. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. To me, it's still Twitter at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. Check out WWL.com for the latest content. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're busy doing that, stick around. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment more trip around the sun of this here episode. And the first thing that we should talk about, because we didn't really get to it in the first segment, at least not in depth, is, man, who is going to play on this offensive line? We heard from Dennis Allen after the game, and we played that audio on the last episode of the decision to bench Trevor Penning, why it happened. They wanted to give him perspective. They wanted to allow him to learn in the background. And so the question now is, how dedicated are you to that decision? Because it sure doesn't look like Ryan Ramczyk or James Hurst is going to play. They were DNPs at both practices. James Hurst is dealing with that ankle injury. It sure didn't look good. It sure looked like it was more severe, right? It was the same ankle injury that he was dealing with ahead of the Patriots game. He played through it. He played through it last week until he couldn't, and I think it was not so much of a recurrence of that injury as just another injury to the same ankle. And so I don't expect him to play. Ryan Ramczyk went to the concussion protocol. It's almost impossible to get back from the concussion protocol in 1 week, let alone 4 days. So I think you're going to have to figure that out. You're going to have a different right tackle and left tackle in this game than you started with last week. And, I'm just going to say this. I think this team is dedicated to the plan to sit down Trevor. I don't think that they're going to look at it and say, well, we don't have James Hurst, so we're going to start Trevor at left tackle. I think they're going to find a way to get him on the bench. And, whether that's trying to send a message or whether you believe what Dennis Allen was saying and they think this is the best way for him to grow, I think that's what's going to happen.
That's definitely not encouraging to hear at all. I guess as a fan, or even for, I don't know what the future lies ahead for Trevor Penning. I don't know. I thought that there was progress being made there, and I'm really curious to what's happened now where this team is taking this stance where now instead of getting the reps, watching from afar is being more beneficial, especially in the situation right now too, which is weird.
Yeah, right. And, he got in there against the Texans, and I would have loved for that to be a moment where he's like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to play great. You could argue that he had his worst game of the season. And,
right,
and maybe that's because he didn't get reps in practice. He wasn't prepared. And that might be an indictment on the decision to sit him down in the first place, because clearly that didn't help him, But yeah, I'm not sure. But he didn't do anything in that game. He had 2 penalties. He allowed a sack. He allowed 5 pressures. He didn't even play the whole game. And so I don't think you did anything. He did anything in that game to make this team be like, you know what, send him back out there. So we'll see. One guy who we should get back this week is who we're going to hear from right here.
This season we've seen James play right guard. We've seen Cesar play right tackle. I know you could be available to play left guard or left tackle if needed. What's the mindset?
Just like I said, just locking in on the plan and just having great preparation. These next couple of days, and wherever we're lined up, we're going to play and give 100% out there.
Fans are like, "Who's that, Jeff?"
It's Andres Pete. Yeah, and so he injured his groin in the last play of practice on Thursday ahead of the Texans game. Apparently, he was an emergency lineman, which is just funny to hear, because what level of emergency is it when you move your right guard to right tackle, a guy who's literally never played the position in his life? But that's not an emergency level of like getting Andres on the field. Anyway, he did play some special team snaps, but so you look at it and you say, okay, if you do sit down Trevor, if you aren't playing Trevor, who are your options at tackle? And right now, so you could theoretically move Cesar back to right tackle. Guarantee you that is not something that they're wanting to do. But you are in a situation where if you end up in a dire straits again, you at least know that he is somewhat capable of doing it. So I guess that's helpful to some extent. The other options are both on the practice squad. So one of the options is Andres Pete right there, who was talking about, wherever they ask me to line up, that's where I'm going to go. And, he was drafted as a tackle. He can play tackle. I think it's a bold move if that's your decision, but that is an option. The other 2 options are currently on the practice squad in Cam Irving, a former first rounder. They signed him a couple weeks ago. He's been sitting on the practice squad. There's a pedigree there, but who knows what to expect from him. We haven't seen him. He wasn't here for the preseason. We didn't even get to see him play in the preseason. And the other one would be Mark Evans. Rookie UDFA has been sitting on the practice squad. He is a tackle. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you sign one of those guys to the active roster if anyone goes on IR this week and you open up a roster spot. Otherwise, you have practice squad elevations you can take advantage of. And I think it's going to be one of those two guys starting at right tackle. And so you're going to go from there, but it's not good. It's definitely not good. And when I'm talking about like, what can you run? A lot of it's going to be contingent on, okay, what can we trust a backup right tackle and left tackle to do? And that's going to be a major story of this game.
Is there any inkling? I know he's been not practicing either on a guy like Landon Young on how he is and like how far out is he from coming back?
That's a good point. I didn't mention Landon. He's dealing with a hip injury.
Yeah.
He hasn't. He would have been a DMP each of the first 2 days here. If there was any indication that he'd be coming back, it would be in these 2 days. Like, I don't think you don't go from a DMP for 2 weeks to playing on Thursday Night Football. So no, I don't think it's in the cards. He's dealing with a hip injury, and it's getting to a point where it's like, what are all these long-term injuries and guys aren't on IR? So like you're theoretically expecting him back. I like Jawan Johnson. These guys have been on injured reserve. These guys have been out with injuries forever, and none of them seemed hyper significant, right? Like it's not like you saw them go down in a game and get carted off the field or anything. It's just like warming up against the head of the Bucks, and it's like, oh, he tweaked that calf, and hasn't heard from him since. Lonnie Johnson is a guy who has been out for a while, but it does seem like he's going to get back this week. So at least that's one of the Johnson twins getting back on the field. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my read on the offensive line is, I think that Trevor is going to be a backup this week to whoever starts at left tackle. And you're going to have to go from there. I think you're going to see Max Garcia get that start at left guard again. And, hopefully, it is kind of crazy when you think about how last week started versus how last week ended. To kick off the game, you had left tackle James Hurst, then Max Garcia at left guard, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. By the end of the game, it was Penning, Garcia, McCoy, Saldiveri, and then Cesar Ruiz over at right tackle. And then you talk about like continuity on the offensive line. I mean, that's even by the Saints standards the last several years where you were playing games without either tackle, and Armstead and Ramczyk were both dealing with injuries. And it's like, it still wasn't this bad.
No, that's why the way things were unfolding last game, after the turnover was turned over, you gave back the turnover. Everything just seemed, it was like the no good, bad, horrible day, whatever you want to say. Nothing went right there, and the offensive line, which has been a huge question, just keeps getting dinged up more and more. And I don't know what to make of the Penning situation right now. I know fans obviously aren't happy with it. I don't think we're happy with it either. And how does he get back in the good graces with the team? And we see and any kind of inkling that he's a first-round talent, capable of lasting here in the NFL, because right now, I know folks are just calling him turnstile already, which isn't great.
No, it's tough. I mean, he's still a young player. There is, as Mickey Loomis might say, growing pains involved here.
I'll be a devil's advocate. I remember mock drafts looking at a guy, Osiris Torrance, and I hear on like NFL Good Morning Football, Osiris Torrance hasn't given up a sack yet this season in Buffalo, and I'm like, oh, who could use that guy right now?
Well, he's a guard.
I hear you, but I'm just saying it was someone that I at least was a possibility for this team we knew in the draft, and for whatever reason they did not pursue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with the players they drafted this past season. Like, I don't think they would be like, you weren't looking for a guard in draft, and you ended up getting Saldiveri in the 4th round, a guy you like. So I'm not, I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna say like, oh man, how could they not draft Osiris Torrance?
Not just specifically him. It just seems like they've missed a lot on the O-line, unfortunately.
I mean, I don't know about that. Eric McCoy was a good draft pick. Cesar Ruiz, I feel like, might have been a little out of left field, but he hasn't been terrible the last 2 years. Like, I don't think they've missed per se. Ryan Ramczyk was a great pick when they made it. That's 2017. It's not exactly a lifetime ago.
Right.
Tehran was great when they made that pick. Andres, you could say what you want about him. He's like a 3-time Pro Bowler at guard. It's not like
I don't know how
terrible.
though.
Huh?
I don't know how he's a 3-time Pro Bowler.
Because he's good.
But he's rarely around.
Well, sure, but like I don't know. When you're drafting a player, you're not going to be like, we can't draft him because in the crystal ball, it told us that he's going to break his forearm.
I'm just surprised he's lasted even this long in New Orleans still.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's easy to, in hindsight, to say, wow, they should have drafted this guy. But
yeah,
all
I know. I'm not trying to play that
evaluate
game.
the decisions as they were made. And, like, I don't know. I'm not going to quibble over, you needed a left tackle. You went and got the best left tackle on the board. And that was the case, right? You could have Bernard Raymond. He's not exactly, a guy that's blowing up either. Like, it's kind of where your options were at. And so I don't know. Either way, you got to make it work with the guys you have. And unfortunately, offensive linemen get hurt, and you got to figure that out. I think from the Saints' perspective, it's like you got to figure out how to stop your offensive linemen from getting concussed once every 3 weeks. Like that's the biggest issue they're having right now. Not necessarily the production. It's they can't avoid head injuries, which is crazy. Like that shouldn't be something that's happening. Ryan Ramczyk already wears this crazy like fucking space age helmet. Like, isn't that supposed to help? Like, what is happening anyway?
That's a great question. What's being taught in classroom then, kind of thing? And do you start looking? I know obviously Carmichael's gone on a ton of fire. I haven't really had the pitchforks and fire coming out for Doug Marrone at all yet.
Yeah, you don't hear the average fan diving in and even knowing who the offensive line coach is most of the time.
Right.
Obviously, some people do, but it's not like you're watching a game and you'll be like, "Damn that Doug Marrone!"
Curses.
Anyway, so let's wrap this up with the X factors because that's what we do. And so if you're looking at X factors on offense, we already talked about the offensive line, so let's not go too hard on any other position there. Who are your X factors on offense?
I definitely want to see the passing game be more successful in this game against a Jacksonville squad that has given up a good amount of passing yardage. They've been stout against the run, it seems, and I've been wanting the Saints run game to get going. I'm just not expecting it to be Thursday night, but I'm going to look for Mr. Derek Carr to finally put it together in the red zone. That's going to be the biggest thing. I'm not going to even say move the team down the field because they've been able to do that, but I'm looking for him to be successful in the red area. Hopefully he can get 3-3, 4-4 kind of deal. I just want to see that decisive, good decision-making and being able to get rid of the ball a lot quicker as well, too. But I think Derek Carr is definitely that X factor for this damn Saints offense's game.
Yes. Now you sound like Dennis Allen with the red area thing. And I don't know why. That's one of the more annoying things to me that he says is the red area. Just call it the red zone. Like, what are you trying to prove with the red area? What is better about that?
I don't know. Just a different way of saying it.
No, it's just funny to me because that's like something that he always says. He says the red area, which like, I don't know. It's like everyone calls it the red zone, but for some reason, like he very, very like clearly calls it that. He must call it that for a reason. I don't know.
Well, yeah, maybe
Tom Coughlin.
We need it to be the green zone.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Tom Coughlin used to call it the green zone.
Okay.
And like I at least understand the meaning there, which is like green means go, red means stop. So like it's like trying to just like a mental gymnastics thing of trying to get that into people's heads, which is like, no, we're not getting to you're not trying to get there. You are trying to score from there, right? It's not about getting there and stopping. It's about getting there and scoring. And so like, but like red area does not change it. Anyway, I don't know. Zone,
the green zone.
Green zone, yeah. Anyway, so I agree with you, and I'll go like I need to see consistent effort from Chris Olave. I really do, because he is and like you can. It's tough because he is that talented, right? So it's like you're being hard on him, but it's because
you expect more, right?
Like like you have the talent to be out there and dominating games, and it just feels like you don't get that all the time. You get that in stretches, and you make these fantastic catches, and then that's always going to be there. But even like there's plays where you need to run to sell a clear out. Like just because you were clear out and you're not an option on that play, you can't just run half speed and allow the defense to know that that's not like the whole point of that is for you to clear them out. And if they can tell just by the way you're running that you are not the first read on this play, that you were just running a clear out, then that kind of defeats the purpose of you running a clear out, right? Like even like if it's Adam Prentice, I still want to see him running. It's like they're not going to be like, oh, they're definitely going to throw a fade to Adam Prentice here. No, but like you got to make them react anyway. So that's to me, that's my X factor is like, can you get that consistent 100 out of 100 effort from Chris Olave when things aren't going well, when the ball's not going to him 3 times in a row, when you're asking him to be a decoy? Because right now I don't think you're getting it. So that's my X factor. Now we can shift over to defense. Who are you looking at on the defensive side?
It's definitely got to be up front, and I guess, I mean, it's easy to pick Carl Granderson right now because he's been a force, but just in general, I'll say D-line, just getting pressure on whichever quarterback is present, because we know Lawrence is hurting and Beathard is inexperienced. A guy that's been around the block, a veteran kind of, quarterback, but he really hasn't been doing much for this squad. And we definitely don't want CJ Beathard, picking apart this team. And I'm sure could if he's given the too much time in the pocket or whatever. But yeah, just being able to apply that pressure consistently and not it happened in the first half, it didn't happen in the second kind of thing. I just want a constant force up front from everybody.
Yes, I think I agree. It's the D line. I don't know if it's necessarily pressure, because I don't think the Jags are going to be dropping back and throwing 30 times in this game. You have to be able to stop Travis Etienne in the run game, regardless of which quarterback is in there. And you lost that game against the Texans in the first half because you allowed Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary to run all over you. And so got Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Brian Brzee, not so much Brian because he's more of a run down or like a pass downs player at this point in his career. But, those are the guys that, I need to see consistent effort and energy, and you need to stop the run. You need to stuff the run. Because when you can do that, then you can worry about the pass rush. Then you got to force them into passing situations. And that's what the Saints did in the second half against the Texans. They'll tell you, they didn't make any adjustments, but the biggest adjustment was not allowing 4 or 5 yards on first down, specifically first down. That's where you get into trouble as a defense. And that's what happened against the Bucs. Like the Bucs didn't run for a ton of yards, but Rashawn White and Keyshawn Vaughn, I think Rashad White and Keyshawn Vaughn, they were constantly picking up chunks, 3 to 4 or 5 yards. And I mean, as an offense, it's not a big play offense. That's not going to go over the top and just methodically move down the field. You kind of need that. You need that early yardage, because if you're 2nd and 10 is very difficult. You need to execute. And if you don't, 3rd and 10 is, especially against this defense that's going to get after you, a lot of times it feels impossible. And that's when, the pass rush gets to you. But, I need to see this defense really be stout up front and not have to send pressure, not have to send run blitzes. They need to be able to just clog things up. And I think they can do that. And I think this Jags offensive line isn't fantastic. Like they just need to be able to assert themselves and not get blown off the snap. And if they can do that, then, I think this Jags offense is going to have a really hard time moving the ball, because they're not going to want to run shot plays. They're not going to want to drop Trevor Lawrence and have him take a 7-step drop and try to find someone downfield and risk someone coming in and like blowing him up. Even if it's a penalty, right? Like I think the Saints are going to try to get after him. When you have a quarterback back there that is dealing with an injury, you're not going out there and trying to hurt a guy, but you are going to make him feel you. You are going to hit him, and you're going to see how he reacts. And I think the Jags are well aware of that. So you need to force them out of the ability to just go 3 yards in a cloud of dust and pick up first downs. So that's my expectation.
And now I feel like, too, I'm going to be like the Cajun Cannon right here. He mentions, obviously, that turnover margin every week. But, man, oh, man, this Jag squad, we know they are ball hawking right now. They lead the NFL in takeaways. That's a big, I won't say scary point, but definitely something to be concerned about going into the matchup. Got to hold on to the damn ball.
Yeah, that is one thing. You know, if you want to pick out positive traits from this Saints offense so far, it has been that they haven't turned the ball over. Right, like the turnover on Zach Bond, obviously that's a fumble, but it doesn't go against the offense. Like they had nothing to do with that. The interception at the end of the game, 4th down, you're trying to make something happen. That's not a turnover that I'm gonna be like, how? You know, like you kind of like that's the type where you say, yeah, that's just anytime the turnover is on the last play of the game, it's not the same as a turnover. Like the one CJ Stroud threw, that was a bad interception. Right? Like that would have set them up in a terrible position in terms of being behind and giving the Saints the ball and plus territory. You haven't really seen a ton of that from the Saints offense. So, you know, that's one positive thing, right? Like if you need to pull out positive traits, you know, if he threw a bad interception in week 1 at the end of the first half, he threw a bad interception in week 2 at the end of the first half. Other than those, I think Derek Carr has protected the ball pretty well. And it's what's kept you in these games, even the ones that you did struggle in, right? Like Adam Prentice fumbled. You know, he's not a guy who should even have the ball. So again, that's a turnover that like you're just like, well, I can't blame the Derek Carr offense for that.
I was thinking I can't recall another fumble on the offense besides Prentice, but I'm sure there has been.
A lost fumble? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, they haven't turned the ball over much at all.
Yeah, fumble wise, I couldn't think of anything besides the Prentice deal, and obviously Zach Baum, but that doesn't go on. That doesn't go on the offense.
Let's see. So fumbles.
Bum, bum, bum.
Adam Prentice fumbled once, lost it. Jamal Williams fumbled but got it back. That's it.
Right, so that's good. They're keeping the ball snug.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like again, you know, Derek Carr has 3 interceptions again. So one of those was at the end of the game. So it's not really, you know, the issue is the issue isn't the interceptions. The issue is that, you know, through 6 weeks, he has as many touchdown passes as Jameis had in week 1 against the Packers a couple years ago. 5.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a problem. They got to fix that. But yeah.
No, I know. And you bettors out there, if you've been taking the under with the Saints, you've won every week.
Yeah, even against the Patriots, because it was because like they scored 34, but the Patriots scored 0. Yeah, so you're probably right. Yeah. Life's too short to bet the under.
Unless you're a Saints fan.
Unless you're a Saints fan, then it's just prudent. All right. That's going to be it from me. This is Inside Black and Gold. It's going to be it from us, I should say. This is Inside Black and Gold.
Right, I'm just going to hang out here.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Nowak, and that's the picture, Steve Geller. Sometimes we hear words from it. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. Check out WWL.com for words and other stuff, sound and other stuff, analysis, all that good stuff. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review, please. Do appreciate it. You know, Jim from Covington is always also very nice. Oh, well, yeah, I should mention there's someone. When I was in New England, someone came up and said that they listen to the podcast, and I appreciate that. I didn't get their name. I was like completely, you know, flustered in terms of like I was getting off the field and I was trying to make sure I could find the post game press conferences. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, you're great. But I do appreciate that. So thanks. I didn't catch his name, but I appreciate whoever that was.
Shout out to the Inside Black and Gold New England faithful.
Yeah, there's a good amount of Saints fans there. You know, it's funny. Like we talk about, it's like, okay, Saints fans are traveling well, but you know they're gonna get fed up and they're not gonna travel after a certain point. You know, I know there was a lot of people who were posting like that they spent a bunch of money to go to Houston, and they were like, "Well, this was a waste of money." I'm like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But that's part of the traveling.
Hopefully the folks don't feel that way about Thursday night, because the Saints fans, the Saints team definitely needs the fans and as much help as they can get right now.
Agreed. But all right, thanks everyone for listening. We will be back on Friday morning with a post game pod. Normally home games I would do a post game, but the night games, like, I'm not going live at midnight. No one, I don't think anyone would rather us go live at midnight. So we'll probably do that Friday morning. Maybe around 10 we'll probably go live and figure that out, so everyone can hopefully revel in the success of the Saints.
Would make it a sting. Yeah, would take the sting out of things for sure.
That would be nice. But all right, y'all, thanks for listening. Who dat? Go Saints.
Tune in Thursday 3:00 First Take for more of me and Jeff. I know you can't get enough.
So much. All right, y'all, be easy. Peace.